Hi guys, so in this tutorial I'm going to do a drawing of a skull of an ape. This is actually a picture I took when I went to the Museum of Natural History in New York. And this is something that's pretty cool. I'm not sure if most of you guys actually have access to a natural history museum where they have like animals and so on display. It's really a cool way to get to study animals in detail that are standing still, so if you want to really I advise it a lot. If you really want to practice drawing animals and so on, birds, whatever they may have on display, I usually just take my sketch pad with me, do studies of animals that I see or anything that I think that's really interesting, and I mean, if they allow it, you take pictures and then you can take those home and study them even further, so you can start your sketches there and further develop those drawings when you get home. And it's something I've done, over the years a lot, and I still do. This is one of several pictures that I took, and I thought this one would be pretty cool. Now, what I thought of is I'm going to do it in pen and ink, but I'm going to do it on a charcoal background, and I'm going to show you how I do that. So basically, I'm going to tone this background, and then I'm going to do the drawing on top of it. And what I may do is, for the areas that are in light, like here, I'm going to use this. This is a Jelly Roll white ink pen from Sakura, and I'm going to use this to do the light areas. So you'll see how I'll do that as well. Now, one thing that I don't like with this pen, well, perhaps they do have different sizes, is that the point is not that fine, so I'm not able to really make like really fine lines that I'd want to with this, but it should work pretty fine. I mean, if you see it, let me see if I can zoom in. See, the lines are not that thin. I would like them to be like this thin. I'm trying to use as little pressure as possible, but I'll see what I can do. But overall, I still will be able to, I think it should work. Alright, so let's talk about how we will tone the background. Well, what I generally use, and I use this in my charcoal drawings as well, I have General's charcoal powder, and what I do is pretty simple. It looks like that. So you can use a chamois or something really smooth. I just use, I'm just going to use regular paper towel on this, and I just put a little bit. Oh, that was too much. But you just rub it in. And eventually it's going to create a nice, even surface. So when you're done, it would look something like this. See? It's pretty cool. So now I'll be able to do the drawing on this surface, and I'll use the Jelly Roll to pick up the highlights. Now, I usually do the drawing in time lapse, but I guess I'll give you some pointers in case you guys may want me to give you some tips on how you could actually draw this thing. Now, going back to what I had showed you guys from an old tutorial where I showed you how you use different ways of seeing things. Now, in drawing this, just like I said, I would normally use whichever of these modes that I think is appropriate for the subject I'm drawing, and also I may combine them. So at any given moment, I may slip from this view to this view and so on. Alright, so for a lot of people, when they're starting a drawing, they're generally like, okay, how do I start this? Where do I begin? And so on. Now, in my opinion, I believe you should experiment with different ways of approaching. And what I generally advise against is using a grid, okay? Because unless you're really meticulous about getting everything exact and so on, or it's for a project or so on, I guess I would definitely say, okay, go ahead. But for general practice, it's good to train your eyes to make judgments, okay? Train your eyes to make measurements. Because the more you do that, the more you refine your judgments. And you've ever seen people who just do drawings and like the proportions would be right on point? That's because they have done many drawings over and over and over until it's like someone who's a basketball player, or whatever sport. The more they take shots, taking an accurate shot is really about refining judgment. So the more you do it, the more you develop your sense of judgment to the point where it's so innate, it's almost second nature, and you don't have to like gauge yourself. In a split second, they can just get a shot pretty accurate because they've trained themselves. from doing it over and over. Same thing with drawing, okay? Just like with any other skill, you practice it over and over, and then your judgment gets refined as the more you do it, okay? So you're going to approach this. There are different ways you could do it. You could think of it as a three-dimensional shape like this, or you could think of it like this, or you could think of it like this. I like starting out like this and then chiseling my way in with this, and then eventually going through this, just like I showed you in the 5 stages of a drawing tutorial. Okay, you can check that out also if you guys haven't seen that. So like with this, just give you a simple little example on how I could approach this in different ways. So looking at this overall shape, okay, there are different things going on. You can say, okay, I'm going to try to capture that overall shape of this thing. And notice, as I said, it's always easier to draw a straight line than a curved one. So using straight lines like so enables you to get things a little bit easier. See that? And then I can start breaking it apart using this one. I find that it's really easy to approach things in this way. See that? Even with this hole, I'm going to see it as a box. Like so. See? Then eventually I can start refining it and make it more rounded. Same thing with these. You can just start with a circle, or you may start with a box like that. Because as I said, straight lines are easier to draw than curved ones. See? And the more I do that, then I start eventually, making these more curved, making them more natural looking, and so on, right? Then it's on to looking at it in a three-dimensional sense. So now I'm thinking of the planes. So for example, see, you can see a separation here, which is why it's also good to draw and practice drawing with good lighting. Sometimes drawing and shading a subject can be challenging because the lighting is not that good to begin with, okay? Because you want to use lighting that suits your purpose. In other words, if you want to practice shading, use lighting that creates good value patterns. We can see distinctions in planes and so on, and that's very important. That's why you see in art schools they set up still lifes, or they have shadow boxes or light boxes where they create optimal lighting conditions for shading, okay? And optimal lighting conditions means that you're able to see the planes that accentuate the three-dimensional shape of the form, okay? So in other words, the lighting enables you to see, okay, this is the front, this is the top. See this, the shadow here, right here. Even though this is a rounded form, you can still feel a plane shift here, and then to the side. See what I mean? And those are the types of things you look for. And then you can start laying in values like so. See, you're separating. And then, as the drawing progresses, you start refining these borders. And that's my general approach. Even with here, see what's going on here is you just have a ridge like this. See? This is facing this way. This is facing up. And that's why that's in light, that's in shadow. Right here. See that? You think of this as an edge. This is facing up, this is facing to the side, just like I did here. Alright? And that's the way you practice simplifying things. Okay? So I'm going to go in and do the line drawing. I may have to draw a little bit harder on this for the line drawing to show. But eventually when I start laying in with the ink, it will start to show itself a lot more clearly. They're pretty much laid in the line drawings, got the proportions down and stuff like that, and I haven't really laid in much shadow or shading and so on. I'm just going to work with it as I go along. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to start laying in the shadows first. I'm going to start working on separating the light and shadow areas. So in these areas is where I'll focus first. You know, areas, the shadow border, I call it, that separates the area in light from the areas in shadow. And then, of course, in these areas you have a little reflected light, so that's why you see this little deep valued line right here. Okay, and that's what I'll focus on first, in deepening those areas, and then last but not least, I'll do the little highlights, and you'll see how I do that. I think what I'll do sometimes is I'll zoom in a little bit so you can see how I actually do the cross-hatching that goes on right here. So that's pretty much it for the ink work. Of course I could go in and knock out some more details and stuff, but I think that's enough to have you guys understand, like, you know, how you could approach something like this. So notice that I focused on pretty much separating the main areas of light and shadow. And that's another thing. See, even here where I lay down this layer of strokes, that's to make a clear distinction between areas that are in light and areas that are in shadow. So even on the teeth, like I put a layer of hatch marks, you can see it. I put a layer of hatch marks over the teeth, and that indicates, see here, I leave these open and put these, a layer of hatch marks over them, and that creates a consistency in the drawing that these are areas in shadow, these are areas in light, and you have to treat areas in light and areas in shadow differently for it to read clearly to the viewer. Okay. Now I'm just going to start putting in the highlights with the Jelly Roll pen. See, it's a pretty small drawing, so I wish the point were smaller, but this should work just to be able to heighten the sense of distinction between light and shadow. Yep, that's pretty much it. So, you know, it's important to see, I'm using these little flick marks. You know, that what that does is it creates a sense of unevenness. All right. So in other words, instead of like drawing a line like this, it's better to do this. Make it seem uneven, because what that does is it helps to reinforce the sense of texture of the skull. So, you know, of course, we know that the skull is not a smooth surface. So, like glass or like something like metal. All right. So you have to create this sense of like discontinuity in the highlights, just like you'd actually see on a textured surface like this. So, you know, you have to make the line seem inconsistent. So instead of, as I said, instead of doing a line like this, you do something like this. Put a little bright spot, you know, and you have to try doing stuff like that. Now, what makes that challenging for some people is that it doesn't look right while you're doing it. But you have to learn to appreciate that sometimes things that seem abstract to you, when you look at the drawing overall, it takes effect and it contributes to the sense of realism. It's really paradoxical. So in other words, sometimes you have to draw abstract shapes when you're drawing realistic things, because if you try to make it look like what it looks like, it may not look right. you have to actually look at the abstract shape. So if it looks like a dot, you make that dot. If it just looks like a little scribble, you make the scribble. And collectively, everything will just merge together. All right. So hopefully you guys got some tips from this that you can apply to your own drawing, and definitely try this effect out, using charcoal. And it really is good practice of practicing light and shadow, learning how to see contrast and use the tone of the background as a middle ground, and then just concentrate on shadows and light areas, and it can make some really dynamic and interesting drawings. All right, so hope you'll have fun with that.